asking me to confirm. Yes, okay. I am here obviously to talk to you about my new book. And does anyone have it yet? Can I get a little, no, not yet. Okay. So does anyone have the first one, Low Tox Life, proper? Okay, so a couple of people do. So Low Tox Life, the first book, which came out in 2018, was really a realization of what it meant to live a life that had us moving forward, doing things a little better each day, each week, each month for ourselves and for the planet. And the 4 pillars of leading a low tox life, as I defined, it was a phrase I coined a few years before that when I decided to move into education and gentle activism in this space. It really encompasses everything: food, body, home, mind, the whole shebang. Because if we look at what benefits us as humans, really, in the main, it is a deep connection to nature. It's thriving microbiome. It's a hugely diverse, whole foods rich diet. It is connection to friends, family, a sense of purpose. You know, these things have been very well researched as what produces a happy and a healthy life for the most part. And I wanted to help people navigate that, because we've become so disconnected, from everything. In our food, we're completely disconnected to nature. If you look at the statistics around ultra-processed food and how much that takes up of our trolleys, it's around 60% in the average Australian shopping trolley. I mean, the mind boggles as to how we got here, but we did. And we got here through a complex web, unfortunately, of quite vested interests, where industry started to become essentially more influential than governments, and where governments started to be able to take money from industry to have an edge in an election. And for me, that's really the dawning of that kind of behavior was what led us to the system we're now currently in and stuck in a way. We most of us acknowledge that we don't want all this stuff anymore, and we don't want to eat all the processed food, and we don't, so many things that we just know aren't quite right. But because we're in a system of perpetual growth, it's really hard to actually navigate our way out of that system. And as an educator and as a fellow human, I really love trying to dive into ways where we can all overlap, where we can all do positive, exciting things in our daily life that really do make a difference to us as individuals, to our families, but also to the entire world. I actually came into needing to change up my diet because I had chronic tonsillitis into my late 20s from early teenage life. And it had gotten to the point where I'd be sick every 2-3 times a year. I'd go on the antibiotics, get well, then feel fine again, and then get sick again, and then go on the antibiotics. And I developed antibiotic resistance for strep, unfortunately. And that's quite a common germ. So it's not ideal, but it was something that I then had to look for solutions outside of the box. And a friend actually recommended that I go see a naturopath, and I had no idea what a naturopath even was. 17 years ago, I was in my late 20s. It wasn't a common part of people's health professional arsenal, right? And I found one, and she helped me with some herbs and some vitamins. I remember zinc and C, and this revolting herbal concoction that she made me take 3 days in a row, and just eating chicken broth in well-cooked carrots cooked in the chicken broth with some brown rice, just very simple, for 3 days. And it cured my strep throat. And I was like, what? I didn't even take anything, because I was so used to this conventional model of healing with medication. And so I was quite fascinated in that and thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I got strep throat again. And so she put me on the same things and I got better. But she said, we need a way out of this. And I've come across some research that links non-celiac gluten sensitivity to the proliferation of strep. There seems to be some sort of link. We don't know what it is yet, but maybe you could try ditching gluten. Now, 17 years ago, you couldn't go to a supermarket and then just find all the gluten-free alternatives. There were none. Packaged food, which was largely what I subsisted on myself in my 20s, was everything contained gluten. And I remember, and I talk about it in the book, I remember going, okay, well, I'll just find a different one that won't have gluten. And I would pick another type of breakfast popper or another type of cereal or another type of something, and that had gluten in it too. And because gluten had so many code names, she'd given me this huge list of all the ways it could show up on a label: hydrolyzed vegetable protein, natural flavor, all sorts of things. I then had to actually study all of the different additives that were on these ingredient lists. And it was the very first time in my life that I had even thought about what was in the things that I was buying in any meaningful way. And I think retrospectively, I look at that and I think, oh my gosh, I got to 27 years old with a university education and had no idea what I was putting on myself or in myself and how that was impacting my health or the planet. No idea. I mean, if that's not a failing of education somewhere, somewhere we should become adults and have a basic understanding of these things. And it really started to make me think about all sorts of things. That's when I started thinking about the cleaning products. And then that's when I started thinking about where my food was coming from now that I was buying more produce, because it was simpler and easier to navigate than packaged foods. And so on and on I went. And that's how the Low Tox Life education platform was formed. It was really realizing how few of us felt empowered to make great decisions for health and the planet, and how we might even go about that journey in the first place was incredibly daunting to a ton of people. Maybe some of you listening today are really daunted by what the next steps might be. And, we see the IPCC reports in the media, and we read the next doom and gloom book on climate change, and we look at the statistics on public health, metabolic health, heart disease, cancer, etc. And it can be really easy to just go, oh my gosh, that's just all so horrifically depressing. I'm just going to go about my busy modern life and just hope that everything's going to be okay. And I wanted to help people realize that we didn't have to tell depressing stories. We could actually come from positivity and positive actions to create a new story. And so my podcast, my books, they're all in that tone. You're not going to be depressed when you come to the end of any of my work. You're going to actually be a bit rah-rah and, oh my gosh, there's all these things I can do. And I write in a way that is very much choose your own adventure. You can pick up a book like Low Tox Life Food, and you'll see a page. I've just opened it up randomly, I promise, like this is not planned. And it's stress-free cooking tips. Keep your stress levels down when cooking by remembering a few key facts. If a good cook doesn't follow a recipe, that doesn't mean they have the exact recipe in their head. Instead, they feel free to add whatever they come across in their kitchen in whatever combinations they think might taste good. And if they're not sure, they taste, assess, what does this need? More sweet, more sour, add a splash of water, getting too dry, and become a thinker in the kitchen. And so that's very much my style, is to allow people to go bite size and really granular and just pick up something small that's going to radically change the story for them in their daily life if they've been stressed about cooking. I'd love to know if anyone has at any point chime into the chat group, which you've got at the bottom of your screen. There's a word chat, and you click that and you can type something and I'll see it. I would love to know any cooking blocks that people have. Like maybe it's just the stress of always having to make the dinner, or lunchbox stress, or fussy eating kids. I'm happy to cover some of those themes today and have people leaving feeling more empowered than when you start, rather than having it be a purely an author talk. Just to have you understand my vibe is much more, I love a good two-way conversation. I think we'll achieve a lot more that way. So please feel free. So Low Tox Life Food started as me wanting to write a book helping not only other people, but myself, of course. That's one of the first people you try to convince is yourself when you go about writing a book and testing a theory on whether we could actually eat positively for the climate. because I don't know about you, but we see all of these reports and a lot of food rankings. And I was interested in that. I wondered whether we could definitively rank some foods as really good for the climate, some foods as really bad, and then just have this nice, neat little protocol, which humans love. We love our list and just get on with it because I'm busy, right? And this was what diet culture taught us. It's what feminism is, one of the unfortunate byproducts of feminism, where we didn't have that conversation about splitting all the housework and, starting to think, okay, you cook on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll cook Tuesday, Thursday, and the weekends. And then we'll all go out to the pub on Sunday. No one had that conversation in the 70s. Women just took it all on. And so we find women who are the chief change makers in the family. And I know this because I run a change making business, and 97% of my audience is females who are 30 to 50. That's really the core of the people who interact with this work. And so we know that these are the people who know something's not right. And it's not right that all the kids in the class have all these allergies and eczema and hives and I'm trying to think about what I can do. It is by and large women who reach out for that information, try and change things. But then, of course, change takes time, it takes money, and we can often abandon ship because those are the two things we lack often when we want to create change. So I wanted to create a book that helped people realize we could be a super powerful climate action change agent from our kitchens. And as I moved in, and I can see some chats starting up, I will get to them, but I just want to give you guys the overview of the book before diving into questions. As I dived in, I realized there was no neat graph, unfortunately. And despite the fact that certain foods are more intensive than others, that's inarguable, it tends to be a lot more about how they're farmed and what those foods and crops have taken the place of in that region in the world than what the food is. And so I was curious about this because that would therefore mean that we could all actually be the type of eaters that we feel best being, because we do know that nutrition is a bio-individual exercise. Some people can seem to thrive beautifully on vegetarian and vegan diets, others not at all. In fact, it can be detrimental to health and vice versa. So once we know that, and that it matters more where the food is and how it's grown than what the food is, then technically we can all come together and overlap with however we eat and actually start to work on the where and the how better and start to connect to our food source better. And then we add to that two things that are not talked about enough in climate change and food. And I can share a couple of reasons why. But that is ultra processed food. So I shared that crazy statistic at the start of 60% of our average Australian shopping trolley is currently ultra processed food, things that we do not need, nor do they help us thrive in any way, shape or form. They're largely shelf stable, long life, highly processed. And if we look at the raw materials of these ultra-processed foods, they often come from monocropping agriculture, extractive forms of agriculture. So those are forms of agriculture where we take more from the earth than we give back when we farm. And it's through no fault of the current farming crop of people. They're the hardest working people in the planet. But it is more just it's been done this way and it's the status quo. And unfortunately, the status quo has an end life of running out of topsoil, as we now know. So extractive farming of the raw materials means we're then shipping these raw materials off to a factory, often on the other side of the world, to then produce this food. Often a huge amount of energy goes into the running of that factory. Then the packaging, the plastics industry, huge, now just overtaken fossil fuels as the number one polluter in the world. And then once it's packaged in the plastic and the cardboard, it then gets shipped sometimes all the way back over to that other part of the world that it came from, to then sit on a supermarket shelf and supposedly be a fun treat to take to the movies, or a taste of what always the real thing is, or a lovely way to have a break. And it's, you just see straight away, you think, oh, And for me, when I clocked this, it was about 12 years ago that it really landed for me just how extractive ultra processed food was, not even just from the farming form, but all the things that then happened afterwards before it landed on our shelf and in the pantry, was how liberating to no longer think, oh, I shouldn't have that. Oh, no, I'm trying to cut down. You know, that whole motivation and willpower piece often that we apply to these foods, but rather, I know how bad that is, not just for me, but every part of the chain around the planet. And I will choose now to no longer engage with that. And it's so much more empowering and so much easier to ditch junk food when you actually really understand what junk food is on a deep level. So the narrative of climate friendly and treading lightly on food, I believe, and there's research mounting to show us, that the plastics and fossil fuel industries are all too stoked to have us fighting over whether meat or beans are the better human diet or is killing the planet or is not. Because that keeps us polarized and against each other while they continue to manufacture these planet-friendly, plant-based, ultra-processed foods. I mean, we now, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with choosing vegan or vegetarianism, by the way, absolutely nothing, but they're trying to tell you that it needs to look like this, when actually it should be a gorgeous, glorious chickpea and veggie curry. You know, it can always be an unprocessed, beautiful, whole food answer, and should. And that's really a wonderful way to unite us all, to start realizing that, keeping us fighting about this instead of actually looking at how polluting those industries are. And when we buy things that engage with those industries, that's the real climate killer food. And that's where we can really all make a difference. I mean, who can't look at their shopping trolley this weekend and go, you know what, you probably don't need that 6-pack of soft drink. You know, get a soda stream and start making your own soft drinks and having a play around with beautiful fresh squeezed orange and mint through a soda water glass. You know, next, and then you're not buying all the plastic bottles as well. See how it's all linked? It's like, it's not just the thing, it's what it's in and it's what it represents and it's all the chain. And you think, oh, and it makes it so much more empowering when we get there in our thinking to realize how exciting it is to actually start letting those things fall away. And I saw some people just really shaking their heads on that ultra processed food stat at the start. And you know, we have to remember that sometimes we might be eating a ton of fabulous whole food and be really confident cooking, but our friend might not be, and maybe they need a hand, and maybe I can invite them over more and we can cook together. And, you know, I made a casserole-ish, shepherd's pie-ish thing that I dropped off to a friend whose gorgeous boy was having a really tricky surgery, and it was a tough time for them that week, very nerve-wracking. And dropped off some food because it's just one of the best things we can do as humans, is connect and just take a load off by dropping off a meal. And she's like, honestly, that was just the best tasting thing our whole family's ever had. We just couldn't believe how delicious it was. And I said, well, why don't I come over, bring a bottle of wine, and I'll teach you how to make it? And she was like, oh, really? Because often great tasting food to the people, and I know because I've been this person who had no idea how to cook, is a mystery. It's something chefs can do. It's something your clever friend can do, but it's never something you think you could do if you're not good at it at this point in time. So to anyone out there who's listening today, if you feel like that, honestly, please buy my book, because it will you'll end up at the end with so many fresh ideas, so much empowerment. Because to me, it's not about pretty recipes that you have to follow by the letter. Ironically, releasing a book with 80 recipes in it, I actually want you to stop needing recipes. That's my motivation with this book, to just be able to rustle up delicious things. So if we ditch that ultra processed food, start minimizing it, if we start to connect to what are regenerative forms of agriculture versus extractive forms of agriculture, start trying to find direct lines to buying from farms wherever we possibly can. Some community supported agriculture boxes can be a really local way to do that. But there are so many fantastic fruit, veg, meat, nuts, pantry items that are trying to localize. You guys have the beautiful Mount Zero legume and grain farm down in Victoria. And you can buy direct from them on their website. And then it's Aussie grown legumes and grains. That's actually quite hard to find outside of the context of finding a direct supply. And I always say to people, it takes about 2 years to build a really rock solid direct supply situation. So don't think, oh gosh, the Googling was hard. And I actually have a bunch of lists to help you Google effectively. And I actually don't even suggest Google. I suggest Ecosia, because then they're planting trees for us, which is awesome. I should have marked it. But there are lists to teach you how to find Facebook groups locally in your area that talk about this stuff. Then you can actually crowdsource the information instead of going it alone on the internet, which can be quite daunting when you're trying to establish these connections. And then the third piece that I found that is talked about, we know it's a bit of a shocker, is the food waste piece. And so statistically, if you look at the amount of food we're sending to landfill and how much methane that produces, we are looking at the third largest polluter in the world behind China and the US. And Project Drawdown is a fantastic resource if you're interested in what effect different changes have in terms of the collective change that would happen if we were able to reduce something or change something. I was absolutely amazed that food waste isn't at the top of the food agenda when it comes to climate. When I realized that eliminating food waste, and it is possible, is the equivalent of taking 500 million cars off the road. 500 million. So to give you the perspective of how massive food waste is, if we cut all air travel today, that's taking 37 million cars off the road. So food waste is more than 10 times as important for us in terms of bang for buck on reducing emissions than air travel. And what do you think gets more media? I mean, we all know, don't we? Everyone is always guilted into, by the very leaders who take private jets to global meetings, guilted into flying less. It's just like, hold on. That just, I mean, of course we shouldn't be, I should pop down to Victoria or a bit less for the odd talk here and there, and we should do it on Zoom. Absolutely. Hopping cities for meetings, we now know that we can get just as much work done in that context over online. But being made to feel guilty for visiting your relatives because you live in a different country to them once a year, I really think that we could focus on some far more important things like air conditioning technology and food waste that we can all play our part in and make a massive difference way faster than we ever could by ditching the annual trip to see grandma. So I think it's really important that we start to understand beyond what we're told is important for us to care about, is to actually look at rankings and facts. And I love the Project Drawdown work and the website and all the scientists that are involved in assessing these different metrics to help us really know. And I was overjoyed to see when I was researching for the book how important regenerative agriculture is in the piece and building strong environments. We're often told we've just got to eat more of this and less of that and more plants and less of this. But if you look at what actually makes the planet thrive, like a little patch of planet, it's biodiversity, and that decreases pests. It increases life, it increases carbon capture, and it increases minerals in the soil, which we're hugely deficient in. Most people have to take mineral supplements. If you do a blood test, you'll see your zinc is very low in Australia because we have very poor zinc in our soil, as an example. So those are really the themes in the first part of the book that I tackle to just get us on a page of unity. So yes, you might eat differently to me, but we can all look at where our food, is coming from, how locally we can get it, and how it's being farmed, we can all focus on ultra-processed food and minimizing it wherever and however we possibly can. And once we've done it in our own homes, we can try and influence the school canteen, we can build committees, we can do some action work. The sky's the limit for the people who are keen. And then we can all focus on food waste, because right now we're still wasting 1 in every 5 shopping bags as Aussies. And I honestly think, and this is one of my tips in the start of chapter 4, rather, where we get into cooking the recipes and feeling a bit more motivated about cooking in general. I honestly think with food waste, if we asked ourselves this one question, we could make a massive difference. And that is this: what do I need to use up replaces what do I fancy today? Think about the system that put us to this. We can have anything we want, anytime we want, can be delivered to our house in 20 minutes, if we're in an urban area especially. Or I get to feel like whatever I fancy today because that's my given right. That is the food industry's creation of a message that has us then calling the Uber Eats because tonight it's Vietnamese, or tomorrow, thinking, oh yeah, I fancy, no, I don't feel like that. We had that last night. That kind of rhetoric is something we've been given permission over decades of messaging to arrive at. And the simple question, what have I got to use up? And to start thinking of food as really precious as a resource is so powerful when it comes to changing the food waste picture in our homes. There's still a lot of work in business and industry needed, and some wonderful people championing that work. But in our homes, we can do that today. Changing our minds around what looks perfect. Getting a worm farm and a compost. I actually noticed yesterday I had some sprouts, some snow pea sprouts, that, when sprouts kind of start to liquefy and all turn into this one green mush because they've been in the fridge for too long. 10 years ago, that would have gone into landfill. Now the worms lap it up and they love it. And I've got that on my balcony. I don't even have a garden. I live in inner Sydney and in a very highly populated area. So we've got a worm farm and a veggie patch out there just in pots. I love Indira Naidu's work, actually. The Edible Balcony, her book, was wonderful for people who have smaller spaces to really feel like we can be a part of the food growing conversation. Is incredibly empowering. And you waste a lot less when you just pick the few sprigs of parsley that you need, rather than the bunch that often then kind of sits there and then it's there and then you can't think of what to do with it. I mean, my new conversation with myself is chuck it in a smoothie. No one's going to know, but old me would have just waited until it looked really sad and chucked it in the bin, like most of us do, right? So if that's you right now, please don't feel guilty. That's exactly what today's for, and what this book is for, is to help change that and get excited about changing that rather than daunted, because daunted means we stress. Stress means we can't act anymore because our sympathetic nervous system's kicked in and it's all too much. And then that's when we just keep doing what we do. So my job is to keep you calm and excited and curious rather than stressed to the max and not moving forward and doing anything. So I'm going to start having a look at some of these chat messages. Definitely fussy eating for kids. Sarah's saying that's a big challenge for her. Feeling overwhelmed at times with how to get a 4-year-old to eat veggies. Eats all fruit, limited veg. Common story, Sarah, and don't feel like you're alone there. I'm just going to read a few of these out and then tackle them. Taking the time to cook. I don't mind cooking when I allow myself the time. Most of the time I'm busy. Luckily, my husband finds it relaxing. Oh, that's good. It's always nice to have a partner who enjoys cooking. Sarah's saying the stress of trying to find new recipes that are quick and will taste good. Looking for them online and in cookbooks can take a lot of time and be quite stressful and take the fun out of cooking. Oh my gosh, you're going to love my book. So I was literally on a podcast before this and I said the exact words was, I remember being a 28-year-old and having like a boyfriend over for dinner, thinking, okay, I'm going to have to cook. So I'm going to have to choose the meal. And so then you're opening the recipe books and you're going through, and then you select the 3 things you're going to cook, the little entree, like the starter thing, the main, and then the dessert. Then you make the shopping list and it's like flipping this long. And then you have to go out and shop all those exact things. And then you get into a panic when they don't have the one thing, but it's a pear tart. I need pears, but it's November. What? Why can't I get pears now? And then you freak out because you've chosen the wrong thing because we're so disconnected from the seasons. You see? And then we get home and then we maybe cook the things and it takes 2 hours because we had to follow this book step by step the whole way. And I don't care how many chefs put out 30-minute meal books. It's exhausting and really hard if you're not a chef. So then we end up stressed out of our minds, and hopefully Sarah's now going, oh my gosh, this is me, because it was me too. So I totally get it. And so, is that you, Sarah, that put this question up? Okay, cool.
Yeah, sorry. I had to nip out for a work call and came back. But
no, that's okay. Yeah, all good. And so really with recipe cooking, I agree. If I had to look in a recipe book every day to get something happening, I wouldn't cook. Plain and simple. It's too exhausting. And so we need to get to a point, and this is exactly why I created this particular part of the book, which is called the Adaptables. So adaptable recipes for any ingredient. And in there, you'll find a casserole, a cake, a lunchbox bar, a pie, and a soup, and a stir fry. And then you learn this basic framework, and then it's a choose your own adventure situation. So all you need to learn is 2 to 3 steps and proportions, like protein to veg, or, that kind of onions to veg, that kind of thing. So think back to year 6 fractions. And, fractions are pretty easy, but this is the way we need to start thinking if we're going to be relaxed cooks. We think, okay, I would put about that much meat if I'm putting that much veg, or that much tofu if I'm doing veggie. And it's usually about this much stock. And you just start to notice what's in these common template style recipes and what you can then stretch them to be from that point in terms of the spice direction you take it to. I give you a ton of ideas so that you can actually start to learn the vocab for adaptable cooking. But once you've done those 6 recipes and you've done a couple of choose your own adventures, the patterns, you can ditch this book. You might like some of the other sections, so keep it by all means. But you should then be able to, at any point, any day of the year, have a look around. What do I need to use up? Yeah, I think I'm going to do a stir fry tonight. And then just proceed without Kylie Kwong's help. I love her. She's a friend. But, we shouldn't need recipe books to cook the daily meal. And the freedom that you get from not having to then meal plan and write everything perfectly and get a shopping list. If you've got some good produce, you can cook up a meal, and it's an incredibly freeing space to end up. Sarah, you asked about fussy eating, so I'll just address that quickly. One of the best things you can do for a fussy eater, and I have a ton of resources actually on the Low Tox Life website over the years, including a fussy eating bundle with like a whole bunch of webinars and books and tips and tools and tricks. But my favorite couple are to start just completely stop taking them to the supermarket. If you're a supermarket shopper, the kids just do not get exposed to that environment. That's number one. And the only place they ever get to go and buy food with you is a farmer's market, even if it's once every quarter. Doesn't even need to be often. So they start to actually build this is where our food comes from conversation in their minds. And they're 2 and they're soaking this stuff up. So it doesn't have to be an older kid. Then the second thing is, engaged farmers always have like little tastes. And so they're gifts at markets, right? Like, oh, would you like to try one? So instead of the lolly at the party, it's the, piece of apple at the market. And then it becomes special to eat produce. It's a treat and you got it for free. Oh my gosh. So like really chatting to farmers and getting them into this line of, these special people grow our food, aren't they clever? or, even if you can grow a couple of pots on the balcony or in the garden yourself, to just get them connecting to food in some way powerfully.
Oh, sorry, that's my microwave.
Maybe just pop yourself on mute. Ask this question and then pop yourself on mute. Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
I should put my hand up. We've started veggie patches in the garden and started sort of connecting with that. And at Kinder as well, they're doing a similar sort of thing. But yeah, I noticed as he got older, because he's hit 4, that the bright coloured packaging at the supermarket and that sort of thing is what really grabs his attention.
Just get him away from it.
Was even better when he was 2. Like 2, he would eat lots of things, but he's become really picky lately, and he knows the certain treats and things that other family members of ours have given him.
Yeah.
But he's asks for those. So we've had to try and put veggies back on the side of the plate and try and really, even if he doesn't eat it fully, getting him to taste it again and the texture and touching.
I totally hear you, and it's a challenge a lot of parents have. I'm a Frenchie on my mum's side, so fussiness just doesn't exist in French families. It just doesn't, and I've tried to figure out how and why, because a lot of my strong cultural background from somewhere else friends struggle way less with fussy eating than my Aussie, UK, and American friends. And I'm like, why is this? And so food marketing is a lot more prevalent in those cultures. It's much stronger presence. And just from listening to people as I started raising a child, I started to hear, what do you feel like? To 2-year-olds, do you feel like dinner now? To a 2-year-old. And this is no one's fault. Like, we can't know what we're not aware of, right? So it's no judgment at all. But we have to remember they are an apprentice. They're a human apprentice that we are bringing up until 18, where we then let them out into the world, which I'm terrified is only 6 years away from me now. But when they're little, we need to teach them the ways of the world. Every Indigenous culture does this. There is a very strong set of things that you do, rites of passage, exercises, rituals, that help you learn what it is to be a human in that culture. We don't have those rituals. And so it makes perfect sense how our kids end up deciding on things and trying things, because we get the advertising, we have the supermarket, we have the kids who have low education in their families about junk food, then influencing your kid, no matter how much you try. All of a sudden, little Jimmy's putting their nose up at things and saying yuck. And then your kid's like, well, yeah, I don't like this that much either, because Jimmy's my best friend. And if he doesn't like it, I'm not going to like, all that stuff that happens with little people. So it becomes really tricky. You're going against the grain of society, literally getting your kids to eat produce. I mean, I can't tell you how many times the carrot was the default toddler snack for my son, because it would take him forever to get through. And it would just kind of keep him chill, especially if we had to be out or doing something for a long time. And every parent who's had a toddler knows that challenge. But so many people would come up to him and go, oh, aren't you a clever boy eating a carrot? Isn't it fabulous that he's eating a carrot? And it was this amazing thing that my son was, and that in itself was like, okay, why is this so amazing? I need to figure this out so I can help families, because that's wrong. If, the normalized food is the baby mums and the grain waves, and the abnormal food is a carrot, then Houston, we have a problem. And so all I can say is I don't want to make the whole conversation about kids, so I will move on at this point, but please connect to the resources on the shop page, lowtoxlife.com. I'm sorry to mention a product, but this is really crucial that we get this right with our little people. We are under-resourced in how to manage these social dynamics with our kids. We don't have the vocab to help them see a different way, and I'm really passionate about getting it right, because if we get little people eating produce, then we get little climate change activists by default. That's like literally, if we think about back to those stats, and don't be afraid to teach our kids how the world goes. One of my favorite talks is my preschool talk on the pretty bright colored flecks on muffins at the cafe and how they come from petroleum. And kids are just like, you're what? And they're very clever. And they go, I don't want that. Yuck. They're tricking us. And then you go, now the light's on. And they become much easier to chat to about things. And then you find some really beautiful freeze-dried raspberries instead to put on the muffins at home. And it's a wonderful journey. So don't think it's hard. Think how exciting a journey. I wonder what's going to work for us. That would be my advice. Now, Monica, your hand's up.
My question was in regards to the seasonal eating with fruit and veg. Do you have a resource or a link on your website, or can you recommend a good site that is for our hemisphere of what is seasonal?
Yeah, so I don't have a specific link to that. We have a resource on national fruit, veg, meat, fish, nuts, seeds, pantry items, regenerative farm sourced places you can shop from. So that might be a really good resource.
Okay.
I will dig that up while we're on the chat so that I can put the link for everybody. It will take me 1 second to just get onto the website. But yes, so the best thing you can do is to just Google your area and the seasons and produce. So what I would put into my search bar is Victoria seasonal produce guide. And you're just going to get a ton of downloadable PDFs from all sorts of wonderful people who have actually done that work to create the seasonal. But the best thing you can do to get to know the seasons, if you're a bit disconnected still, like I was a few years ago getting into this stuff, is, again, when you shop at a farmer's market, you start to see. And like I shared that funny cooking for the boyfriend example. A couple of years later, I was making a Maggie beer recipe, and I think it was pears again, actually. It was another pear dessert. Don't know why I seem to like pear desserts. There you go. And I had realized that shopping organic might be a useful thing to move into wherever we possibly could. And so I started to do that. And with that, I still was taking my recipes that I was cooking from largely at the time, but was getting to my organic shop, and then the lady was saying, sorry, can't have that. It's not the right time of the year. And I was really confronted by that, because we are so conditioned to thinking we can just pop into the supermarket and get whatever we want whenever we want it, that I didn't know how to change up my plan in terms of what I was cooking with this new information that it wasn't going to be able to be pears. And the lady at the organic grocer said, well, why don't you use the peaches that we just got in? They're beautiful. You saute them. Show me the recipe. Yeah, you just do the exact same thing, but you put the peaches in the pan instead of the pears. I was like, mind blown. I can substitute things. But if you're not taught this stuff, you can quite easily go through life thinking, oh, I guess I can't make that recipe because I don't have pears. And so this is where I think the flexible cooking is so important, because it helps give us more freedom, and it helps us more successfully use up everything we have, rather than move on to the next thing as a complete starting from scratch situation. I mean, no wonder everyone's exhausted trying to put food on the table if we're starting from scratch every night. I morph things into next things that, like, the original meal is not known. It's only like 5 years ago. I just keep morphing things into the next thing they're going to become. But one of my favorite tips for motivation is actually, if you're chopping an onion, why not chop 3 and put 2 of them in a Pyrex? So the next time you have to chop an onion to start dinner, you've actually done that starting point. And if you've got dinner started, then you're more likely to actually cook dinner instead of opting for the takeout. And the chopping of the onion is often the, here we go, moment that a lot of people have when getting cooking, which I totally sympathize with. On a busy day, it can be like, oh my gosh, I haven't even started. And that onion is the symbol of an unstarted dinner. And so if you've already got them done, then it can actually be a little confidence booster into getting it happening. So I'm just going to put the produce guide into the chat function, so you can grab that, open it up, so you've got it on your browser for later. But every state in Australia is represented there, so feel free to share it with relatives, I really wanted to produce something with this book that would be a moving document that we could keep adding to. So if there are places you're shopping from and you've been at this for a while and you know a really great farmer we can all support, then pop the details in the comments. We'll check them out, just make sure it's all good, and then pop them on the list and update it. So I want this to be an amazing reference that everybody can turn to and keep referring back to when, we're busy. I get it. So I want to create the lowest barriers to entry possible in terms of getting things happening. So...
yeah, that's coming to an end, Alex.
Yeah, I know. I can see. So 12 o'clock we've got till?
Yep.
Okay. So Christine saying, I'll buy the book today, take it to my sister tomorrow. Great Christmas gift. Thank you. Awesome. It's not the easiest time to sell books when everyone's come out of lockdown and the last thing they want to do is cook from home. So I really appreciate anyone supporting authors, myself or others at the moment. Meredith, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Oh, not so much a question, a comment.
Yes.
I think the book's going to be a terrific gift for Christmas, which is very timely and very thought-provoking. I've got younger members of the family who are coming, granddaughters who like to cook and are very conscious of ingredients and things like that. Some of the younger children are amazing at what they're learning.
I know.
Especially when they've had the allergies and things like that, they're very conscious. My own daughter, who's 40, has had a big journey similar to yours with the tonsillitis, and so I was very interested to hear that. What I was going to say, though, is that when I was busy working, cooking for me is not such a problem, but I used to do things like if I knew I was going to have a very busy night, I'd cook 2 meals on the one night because you could do it without thinking. So you'd eat one and put one in the fridge, because I had a bit of a thing about not eating the same meal 2 nights in a row.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
I think I'm a bit over that now, but I get desperate. But the other thing is, I think also to learn to use your freezer, because I think when you're cooking and you're busy, the thought of having to cook every night or
it's exhausting.
Very busy night,
it's
just. But if you can see the benefit of, thank good I did it that way, because now I can have virtually a night off, or we're going out, so it's easy. That helps you to really prepare well. And it's that thinking and the shopping that help you to be able to do those things, and the shopping list too. But I totally agree with you. I grew up in a farm and we grew a lot of our own food, and we're very conscious of all of that.
That's brilliant.
It's great to have that relationship with the growing of the food and eating and preparing meals. And I think I'm so glad we're coming back to it.
Yeah,
I think we're all conned by takeaway and big business trying to sell us all these foods with this revolting stuff in it. If you just look at the Americans coming out of the supermarkets and the size of them, I think if that isn't a sign that you need to really think about some of the food, your processed food, I think that's a big wake up. So I don't have any processed food virtually in my fridge, maybe cheese.
Okay, I'm going to have to wrap you up there, Meredith, and I'm sorry. I know it's a kind of conversation we could all be having all day. You bring up a good point, a realistic point. We're sicker than we've ever been, all of us, if you look at us as a group of statistics, and yet we're more health conscious than we've ever been in a lot of ways as well. So there are obviously still a lot of disconnects with people. There are a lot of issues with the way we're treating only acutely our situations. I think I can hear someone not on mute. If you can just make sure you're on mute. And the way that we fix things is to simply connect with nature. We can't know we need to save something, ourselves or nature, if we're not in love with it. So to be kind to ourselves, to love that we get this chance to be on this planet, and to look after our bodies in a way that helps us thrive. And then the byproduct of that being the planet getting supported as well to thrive, because we really are all part of one big ecosystem, and disconnecting ourselves from it in the first place was one of our big mistakes. But I'd like to hope that today we were able to chat about some themes that help bring us a bit closer to what's important. I actually see Fiona there has said, what's preventing local councils from establishing commercial grade organic composting facilities? Each household could have an organics bin. There are a few councils doing some pretty exciting work in that space. I know in Sydney we have 3 councils that have the little purple bins for organic waste, and even some of the big green bins you can also combine garden waste and food scraps. But worm farming and composting is just something we all need to take on as a priority. If we can't get our councils to do it, and we should write to them often to ask, because they don't know, they're not telepathic. But if they keep getting a ton of emails about how we don't have food scraps bins and we want them, then they're going to look at it more closely. But Costa actually wrote a little part of my book on worm farming and composting, because as I started writing that part, I was like, no, it's got to be Costa Georgiadis from Gardening Australia, and he contributed to the book because he has been a champion for worm farming and composting since the beginning of time, I reckon, with a beard like that. And I mean, you know, now that we know how massive food waste is, it's a non-negotiable. Scraps need to go somewhere where they can become new life, not to landfill. And however we can do that, tiny little worm farm, if you live alone, is a really great way to do it. Or share a worm farm with your block and get a metal one so that rats can't get in and things, because I know that's a barrier for a lot of apartments and strata. We have to just start to push a little bit and to realise riding into the supermarket about the plastic and styrofoam on our sweet potatoes is wrong. I don't want it anymore. And, you know, just start to be a bit more vocal, however we possibly notice is necessary. I often joke with my husband, oh my gosh, I've become like, you know, the little old person who just is disgruntled with the world and keeps writing letters. But we kind of need to do that when we're young, so that when we're old, we get the fruit of our work, right? Instead of getting to the end and being annoyed by everything. So a couple of laugh emojis happening there. So it is 11:58. I think I addressed all of the comments there. Christine saying, love Costa, don't we all? Sarah, you've got your hand up. Do you want to just ask one quick thing?
So it's not a question, it was actually a really quick thing. So I'm new in the role as the Waste Education Officer at Council.
Awesome.
And the question that someone had just before, I just wanted to make aware, because I think some people may not know, but Council do offer FOGO. We do have the caddy and the food and green waste in the one bin, because I know someone else mentioned that they were aware and that Council offer that. But yeah, that's a service with your green bin if you've already got a green bin, or you can sign up with Council to have a green bin, and you've got the caddy and you can put food scraps in there. And Council is engaged with a commercial composting facility that process that and turn it back into compost as part of the so there's a lot of councils that do it. Some people are still in Victoria trying to hop on board, but we do have it, and we've had it for almost 2 years now.
Well, that's a group project for the next couple of weeks, isn't it? I love it. Thank you for adding that in. So thank you so much for having me. I know it's a busy time for everybody coming into the end of the year, and to take an hour out to have a think about these things, you know, it's not easy, and it just fills my heart with hope that people come together and have these conversations and listen to these ideas, because with a bit of luck, it's landed in a really positive, energizing way, rather than oh my God, you know, which tends to be how we come away from climate chat. And hopefully we're all relaxed and empowered and curious enough to move forward and do some things. And if you're already really proficient, I recommend inviting friends over and turning it into a cooking session, and you know, having a laugh, having a chat, connecting with community, friends that you know aren't quite as good at things as you might be in this area. They could use your help. And the best way to help people is to cook together and eat together, because then that's a delicious thing to do, rather than a judgy thing to do, talking in a cafe, which can come across, you know, in a really different way if you don't get a yummy meal at the end. So I really appreciate everybody's time, and thank you so much, Monica, to you and your team for having me.
Absolutely, pleasure. That was fantastic, Alexx. Really, really great author talk, really informative. And as Alexx has mentioned, Low Tox Life food, which is available at Robinson's Bookshop for those who are local to Frankston, or your other local bookshop if you're in Mornington or whereas. We also have copies in the library to borrow, but it's good to have your own copy because it has a notes section at the back that you can make some notes, and plus you need it much longer than you can for the borrowing time. But if you want to have a good look at it first, you can borrow it, but definitely Robinson's Bookshop. And Alexx, thank you so much. We've recorded this session, which will then go onto our YouTube once it's edited, so people can go back and watch it again.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll stop recording. Okay. Thank you, Alexx. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Have a beautiful weekend.